Good day to all. This is Miss Vinita from KAHM Unity Women's College. Through this presentation, I would like to share a few of my thoughts and understanding of the poem Stonemasons, My Father and Me by Namdeo Dasal, prescribed for second semester BA English, Calicut University. Namdeo Dasal is a Marathi poet and a Dalit activist whose poems have been highly praised for their power, force, and their style. The poet didn't differentiate his art or poetry from his politics. We can know more about the poet as we move along the slides, and don't forget to do your own reading and research along with this. Before we get into this particular text, let's see certain small tips that can help you in reading any poem. When we analyze any poem, do understand every poem communicates something between the author and the readers. The challenge in studying a poem is the meaning-making process. So, for those of us who find studying poetry difficult, consider these 6 basic steps. Needless to say, read the poem many times. Try to figure out within your premises what does it speak to you. That will be step number 1. And step number 2 is studying the title. Titles may provide clues. Check the words in combination. Something might strike you. Step number 3, identify the speaker. What you feel is your identification. It may change, but don't fear that you may be wrong. As we read more, our thoughts and understanding are subject to change. You may think of the gender, the age, the ideology, what is the poet addressing, how does the poet look at it, etc. Next step would be identifying the mood and tone. What feel do the lines convey? Is it celebrating something or agonizing something or a particular situation or a loss? Is it lamenting? Is it enjoying? The feel may vary. So reading is important. Now moving to the next step, which is trying to paraphrase. This is something that you can do line by line or stanza wise. Writing it down can give clarity to the abstract, unexplainable features or thoughts in a poem. The last, 6th simple step is identifying the theme. What is the issue that the poem brings out? So get to the core of it to identify a universal truth or a conflict or a sense of beauty that the poet is trying to bring forth. A simple composition may have multiple themes. Let's take a look at the poem Stonemasons, My Father and Me by Namdeo Dasal. What does the title say? The poem refers to a community, the Stonemasons, and a father and a son. Obviously, we will try to find out what is peculiar about this community and the father and the son that the poet was inspired to write about. The son in the poem is the poet himself, so it's autobiographical, and he brings together all these three. These three means the community, the father, and the son. In a research paper on Dasal by Vinay Darwadkar, which is available online, he says that the stonemasons in the poem are the Vadaris, Vadaris, an untouchable caste from the Telugu-speaking region bordering Maharashtra on the east. The father is a Mahar laborer, which is again a low caste in Maharashtra, or you can call them the marginalized community or the Dalit community. This is a father who has been much exploited and oppressed by the modern urban labor industry. It might help if we know a bit more about this Mahar community and their life, because only then would the tone and theme of the poem gain clarity. The people of this community have historically served as all-purpose servants. They were associated with carcasses or dead bodies, as they were the ones who removed dead cattle from towns and villages. They were not allowed to enter temples, as they were called the Antyaj or the Adishudra. Adishudra means the lowest of the low in the caste hierarchy. They were allowed to live only in certain quarters segregated from the village or town, which they called as the Vadas. They were the ones who maintained the stigmatized ground where dead cattle were disposed, called the Maharshi Shola. So all these made their existence or their survival really challenging in across history and even during modern times. Now it's important to see what is the present status of the Maha community as well. Recently, in the course of the last 200 years or so, these people have also migrated to larger towns and cities. But many are still destined or rather forced to continue in their caste bound occupations. Many continue in the back-breaking work of breaking stones and rocks for the construction industry and live in slum areas or along pathways in makeshift, pathetic shelters. So the reality is that even in modern India, they have not been able to break down the caste restrictions placed upon them by the larger Hindu community. The father is, in the poem, is from this oppressed community, and so is the son. But the voices of the father and the son are different in the poem. Let's get to the poem again. If you look at the structure of the poem, the poet is using stonemasons as a motif at the beginning of each stanza. There is a glorification of the job done by these stonemasons and metaphorically using surrealist expressions like inseminate stones, mix blood with stones, give stones flowers, and give stones dreams to dream. The poet represents the feel of these Vadaris or this community and the attitude they have developed in accepting their position as untouchables. If you look at the second line of each stanza, you see a sharp contrast to all the first lines of all the stanzas of the poem. In sharp contrast to these are the images used for the young speaker, the son of the poem. He acts unconventionally, rebelliously, and subversively. Look at the phrases he has used for the son. He sets match to fireworks. He makes loud music with horns and trumpets. He counts up exhausted horses and breaks head with stones. The diction the poet has used for the son is quite violent, and hence we call it rebellious and unconventional. The rebellious temperament which you see in all the stanzas serves the purpose of Dasul's poem. We can state his purpose as to give a vent to the ultimate discrimination that the Dalits suffer. In the first stanza, he violates the notion of the patriarchal authority which goes hand in hand with caste ethics. In the next stanza, you can see he uses words like Parsi and inseminating stones, mixing blood with stones, etc. But even in the second stanza, there is a lot of rebellion. The rebellious son dares to overtake his social superior, the Parsis. The Parsis, I hope you have understood, they represent the capitalist class, the modern industrialist, and the entrepreneur class who have always been exploiting this Dalit or the suppressed class. In the same stanza, when he smokes a cheroot is something that you smoke like a bidi or something that gives you the effect of a drug, he shows his disrespect for one's elders and social superiors, as well as a subversive modernity in the Indian social context. In the third stanza, the young man vengefully harnesses himself to a cart and handles his father's dead body. Though this touch of the dead refers to their perpetual, untouchable status in society, the young man prefers to do that. This is a kind of resistance. He doesn't want to stay away from what they do, but staying in it, he wants to establish his identity. But this touch establishes the deepest of bonds between the two men. In the final stanza, if you look at it carefully, the circle of rebellion is completed when he says, "The stonemasons build houses with stones." He metaphorically expresses how they willingly accept this unchanging destiny in the caste system. The young rebel prefers to carry stones on his head and not to build a house but to break heads. Structurally, you can say that he is accomplishing the fusion of four basic human elements here: the stonemason, the father laborer, the capitalist, and the laborer's son, which can be said to be done in a montage like fashion. The montage means a single pictorial composition made by juxtaposing or superimposing many pictures or designs. Coming to the theme of the poem, in the syllabus, the poem has been included in Module 3 with survival as the main focus. Dasal's poem has been picked from Dalit literature with its strong voice to break away from the crushed and pushed down status. The word Dalit means crushed and pushed down. So the survival instinct in the poem has to be identified not as it is now, but for a redefined human identity. Having lived close to Kamatipura and other inhuman conditions, the poet used poetry as a tool to express harsh realities rather than romanticizing and pleasing the readers. So you can look at all these as themes of the poem: rejection of the dehumanizing past, detesting any attempt to eulogize or praise or romanticize the stonemasons and their craft. This can be looked upon as a vehement protest on stereotyping, or he is portraying the docile acceptance of a father or the previous generation versus the contempt of the younger generation towards this self-denying occupation. Or you can even say that this is a powerful indictment. Indictment means something where you are protesting against something of a caste-ridden society. The poem juxtaposes the past and present in a society anxious to engender stereotypes. It is important to analyze the significance of the poem as a sample of Dalit literature. So since it is significant to analyze the features of Dalit literature we see in the poem, one feature you can see is the attempt to erase their own history as untouchables, defying the eulogies or the praises of the society about the stonemasons and their craft. Also, the questions of survival and identity featured in the poem can be looked upon as the features of Dalit literature. Studying this poet would be incomplete without looking at the movement called Black Panthers movement. It was a movement that largely comprised of the slum dwellers of Mumbai, and they had as their main objective resistance and termination of the atrocities against Dalits. Dasal was actively involved with this movement, and to spread the message, he started a magazine called Vidroh. Through this Vidroh magazine, he got the writings of Dalits published. They were the voice of the downtrodden and the depressed. The poem Stonemasons, My Father and Me was one among the anthology called Golpitas, which is considered a remarkable creation of the subaltern literature. it's really useful if you can look at what critics have mentioned about Dassel and his poetry. In his work, Subaltern Discourses, the author states that Dassel is known to use vocabulary deliberately to violate literary taste and to force the reader to acknowledge that literary language would not be allowed to distance readers from horrific human experiences and man's inhumanity to man. Hence, Dassel's poems are seen to be written with great force, which we can see in the poem Stonemasons, My Father, Me and Me Too. Much remains unexplained through these few slides. This poem is one from the anthology Golpita, as I mentioned earlier, and this is considered a remarkable creation of subaltern literature. All these works that are published through Dalit literature were attempts meant to root established social system and to work for root out established social system and to work for a new social order on the principles of justice, liberty, humanity and equality. So please do further reading to explore greater sparks of the poet. I have suggested two readable resources in these slides. One is a Subaltern Discourses and another one is a journal article by Vinay Dharwadkar. If queries still remain, please write to me at mkvinith@outlook.com. Your comments and suggestions would be highly appreciated. Thank you all. Stay home, stay safe.